It was the most important place of learning in the ancient world, and we don't know where it was or where it is now.
History has a way of hiding its greatest treasures in the most unexpected places.
There have been papyrus documents found in Egypt.
That's exactly why I couldn't look away when whispers started circulating about the Lost Library of Alexandria.
The entire text has been overwritten by a 15th century scribe. Not only that, he's added in 15th century decoration. It has a very strange appearance.
Yes, that library potentially being found. The sheer weight of what this could mean for everything we think we know about ancient civilizations is staggering.
Now, this is quite a discovery. Fragments of a biblical scroll, along with other relics, have been found in desert caves.
Let's dive into the mystery. There's something oddly comforting about thinking the internet holds all the knowledge in the world. But long before we had Google, humans tried to build a place where everything ever written could live in one giant, glorious hub of wisdom.
It's important also because this is the first time when such fragments are found in an excavation and brought straight here.
Welcome to Alexandria, Egypt, 3rd century BCE, home to one of the most ambitious ideas in human history, the Library of Alexandria. This wasn't your average neighborhood library with late fees and paperbacks. It was part of the Mouseion, a mega research complex dedicated to the Muses, the Greek goddesses of the arts, science, and inspiration. Think of it like the Ivy League of the ancient world, but with scrolls. The goal? Simple. Collect every piece of knowledge from every known culture. No pressure. Ships docking at the port were reportedly searched for scrolls, which were then copied and sometimes kept. By some accounts, this place eventually housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Historians don't all agree on the exact number, but one thing's for sure. It was massive, and impressive, and tragically short-lived. See, Alexandria's grand experiment in knowledge didn't exactly have a smooth ride through history. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar found himself caught up in a bit of a situation. Let's just say things got heated during a military encounter, and some of the flames made their way to the docks, and possibly the library. Fast forward to 391 CE, and you've got Theophilus of Alexandria, under orders from Emperor Theodosius I, tearing down the Temple of Serapis, which housed a large portion of the collection. Another blow to humanity's intellectual stash. But here's the twist you didn't expect. Egypt wasn't done with the idea. Jump to 1974. Lotfi Dowidar, then president of the University of Alexandria, dusted off the dream. He wanted to recreate the magic just in a modern way. By 1986, Egypt had UNESCO on board to conduct a feasibility study, and the Passion Project got its true champion, Mustafa El Abadi. After years of planning, support, and global teamwork, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina finally opened its doors in 2002. Not just a pretty building with bookshelves, this was a full-on cultural complex. Today, it stands tall as a tribute to the original, welcoming people from all corners of the globe in the name of knowledge, dialogue, and understanding. And just when you think that's the only epic library story from the ancient world, think again. Over in what is now modern-day Turkey, a different kind of intellectual powerhouse was on the rise. We're talking about Pergamum, home of the Library of Pergamum, one of Alexandria's fiercest competitors. This wasn't just a backup plan for readers who couldn't get a scroll in Egypt. No, Pergamum had a vision of its own. Built under King Eumenes II somewhere between 197 and 159 BCE, this place supposedly held around 200,000 volumes. That's a jaw-dropping number when you realize we're talking about handwritten scrolls. Pergamum itself was the kind of city that made other cities feel underdressed. Cultural hub? Check. Political influence? Absolutely. A hotbed for the arts? You bet. The Attalid dynasty, especially King Eumenes, wasn't playing around when it came to turning the city into a beacon of knowledge and sophistication. So naturally, building a massive library right next to the sanctuary of Athena just made sense. Knowledge and wisdom in the same zip code? Classy. And yes, the library wasn't just thrown together in the corner of a marketplace. It sat proudly at the northern end of the Acropolis. Fast forward to the 19th century, and the ruins of Pergamum were practically playing hide-and-seek until curious European explorers started poking around. German engineer Karl Humann stepped up in a big way between 1878 and 1886, leading excavations that brought Pergamum's lost glory back into the spotlight. While the exact location of the library kept playing hard to get, Humann did discover the famous Pergamon altar, now chilling in Berlin's Pergamon Museum, by the way. By the mid-20th century, archaeologists were zeroing in. Near the sanctuary of Athena, they found a building with niches, likely the ancient version of bookshelves, suggesting they'd finally tracked down the legendary library. Now, while Pergamum was giving the ancient world its intellectual glow-up, something equally fascinating was quietly waiting to be rediscovered. Buried beneath volcanic debris for nearly 1,700 years. In 1750, workers digging a well in Resina, now Ercolano, Italy, unearthed what would become known as the Villa of the Papyri. This wasn't just any old find. It turned out to be a major archaeological jackpot, a slice of history preserved under layers of volcanic debris from the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The dig was spearheaded by Roque Joaquín de Alcubierre, a Spanish military engineer with the royal nod from King Charles VII of Naples to poke around these ancient sites. Alcubierre started by tunneling through the solidified volcanic leftovers, but let's just say his methods were more bulldozer than brush. Then came Karl Jakob Weber, a Swiss architect and engineer who joined the team in 1750. Weber switched gears to a more methodical and scientific excavation approach, detailing the villa's layout so precisely that his drawings are still priceless to historians today. In 1752, the team hit the jackpot, a trove of papyrus scrolls housed within the villa. Known as the Herculaneum Papyri, these scrolls are a rare snapshot of classical library life. But here's the kicker. The scrolls were carbonized by the heat from Vesuvius, making them as fragile as a politician's promise. Early attempts to unravel them turned some into confetti, until King Charles VII wised up and put together a squad to handle these delicate artifacts with the care they deserved. Camillo Paderni, one of the first to try making sense of the texts, found out that looters of yesteryears had already been there, swiping statues and busts long before his team arrived. Digging continued on and off until 1765, but then had to be paused because the local residents weren't too keen on having a historical dig under their homes. It wasn't until the 1980s, armed with Weber's meticulous notes, that archaeologists relocated the villa, paving the way for today's more refined excavation techniques. Jumping over to Ephesus, Turkey, we land in front of the stunning Library of Celsus. Built between 110 and 135 AD, this architectural masterpiece was the brainchild of Gaius Julius Aquila. He wasn't trying to flex for himself. He actually built it in honor of his father, Tiberius Julius Celsus Ptolemaianus, a former proconsul of Asia Minor. Talk about a tribute. And Aquila didn't go small. The library held around 12,000 scrolls, making it one of the largest in the ancient world. That's like the Amazon Kindle of the Roman Empire. But, of course, time didn't do the place any favors. Fires, you name it, battered the building over the centuries until it eventually collapsed and got buried under layers of dirt and stone. Out of sight, out of mind. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that interest in Ephesus picked up again. A British engineer named John Turtle Wood started digging around in 1869. He was actually on the hunt for the Temple of Artemis, but in doing so, he unintentionally helped lay the groundwork for future discoveries, including, eventually, the Library of Celsus. The site stayed mostly in pieces until the 1970s, when German archaeologist Volker Michael Stracke led an ambitious restoration project from 1970 to 1978. He and his team worked to rebuild the facade, using original fragments wherever possible. The result? A jaw-dropping, photo-ready monument that gives you just a glimpse of how grand Roman architecture really was. And thanks to that restoration, Ephesus once again became a magnet for tourists, history buffs, and everyone who just really likes old buildings. Speaking of hidden gems, let's shift the spotlight eastward, deep into the desert lands of Dunhuang, China, where one quiet monk made a discovery that would rewrite history. In the late 19th century, a humble Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu took it upon himself to look after the ancient Mogao caves. These weren't just any caves. They were an entire complex of Buddhist grottos carved into the cliffs, filled with art, statues, and centuries of devotion. But on June 25, 1900, things took an unexpected turn. While clearing out sand from Cave 16, Wang and his worker Yang stumbled upon something odd: a sealed wall. Now, most people would probably just move on. But Wang, he dug a little deeper. Behind that wall, they found a secret chamber that had been hidden for nearly 900 years. It was later named Cave 17, or more dramatically, the Library Cave. When they cracked it open, boy, were they in for a surprise. The cave was packed, literally from floor to ceiling, with around 50,000 manuscripts, paintings, and prints that spanned from the 5th to the early 11th centuries. We're talking about a treasure trove of medieval Chinese life captured in religious texts, literature, administrative records, and artworks, with pieces in Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, and Sogdian. Wang knew he'd hit the historical jackpot and tried to get some backing to preserve these gems. Sadly, the local bigwigs initially didn't share his enthusiasm. The plot thickens when French sinologist Paul Pelliot shows up the next year. Pelliot, who was no slouch in the language department, handpicks nearly 10,000 items, including some juicy administrative and financial docs that shed light on the monastic community's daily grind. The treasures of the Library Cave didn't stay secret for long. Japanese and Russian expeditions led by Otani Kozui in 1911 and Sergei F. Oldenburg in 1914, respectively, managed to snag a good portion of the collection. These bits and pieces ended up scattered across the globe, which, lucky for us, has helped researchers dive deep into the intricacies of medieval Central Asian culture. Now, speaking of finding unexpected treasures, let's wander over to a different part of the world where another accidental discovery was about to unfold. Back in the early days of 1947, a young Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Ed-Dib was tending his flock near the caves of Qumran along the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea in the West Bank. Now you know how goats are, always wandering off. So, while chasing down a stray, Muhammad stumbled upon a cave. What did he do? He threw a stone inside because why not? Smash! Inside, he found these huge clay jars, some packed with ancient scrolls wrapped in linen. Little did he know, he'd just hit the archaeological jackpot, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, realizing this might have been bigger than finding extra pasture, Muhammad and his pals lugged the scrolls back to their camp, scratching their heads over what to do next. Enter Kando, a cobbler and part-time antiquities dealer in Bethlehem. He got one look at these scrolls and knew there was something special about them. So, he snapped them up and started making calls. One of those calls reached Metropolitan Mar Athanasius Yeshua Samuel, who sensed these bad boys were worth a look. In 1948, as the area was buzzing with political tension and the Arab-Israeli war was kicking off, these precious scrolls got a one-way ticket to Beirut for safekeeping. Meanwhile, scholars like John C. Trevor were squinting at them, comparing them to the oldest biblical manuscripts, and nodding appreciatively at their significance. Inspired to trace these scrolls back to their roots, archaeologists like Gerald Lancaster Harding and Roland DeVoe dove into the Qumran area. By January 28, 1949, They had hit the mother lode, Cave 1, plus 10 more caves over the next few years, each stuffed with manuscripts that painted a vivid picture of Jewish life back in the day. And guess what? Nearly every book of the Hebrew Bible was in there, except Esther. She's always the elusive one, isn't she? Now hold your horses, because the tale of unearthed treasures doesn't end there. Over in present-day Iraq, the late 19th century was cooking up its own historical revelations. Archaeologists had their picks and shovels out in the ancient city of Nippur. What they dug up wasn't just old pottery or random artifacts. Nope. A massive collection of cuneiform tablets that were about to rewrite some of what we knew about ancient civilizations. It all kicked off in 1887 when Reverend John Punnett Peters, a professor who knew a thing or two about Hebrew, pitched this wild idea to dig up ancient Mesopotamian sites. Thanks to some deep pockets in Philadelphia, the Babylonian Exploration Fund was born, and by 1888 they were setting up camp at Nippur, which was basically the Vatican City of ancient Sumer, dedicated to the god Enlil. With Peters at the helm, they began their digging in 1889, and it wasn't a walk in the park. They had to deal with the brutal desert climate, diseases, and the occasional squabble with locals, but persistence pays off. They unearthed over 30,000 cuneiform tablets, which is as massive as it sounds. Meanwhile, over in Fez, Morocco, another library was making history, but it had been at it for a while longer. The Library of Al-Qarawiyyin in Fez, Morocco, isn't just some dusty old bookshelf. It's the world's oldest continually operating library. Thanks to the brains and bucks of Fatima Al-Fihri, it first opened in 859 CE and has been lighting up minds for over a millennium. So, who was this Fatima Al-Fihri? She was a woman of fierce intellect. Fast forward through time, and this library becomes a magnet for brainiacs from all over the Islamic world. But let's be real, even the best of us show our age, and by the 20th century, Al-Qarawiyyin was looking a tad weary. Time, the elements, and just the constant handling of its treasures were starting to take a toll. Enter the Moroccan Ministry of Culture with a game plan, and Aziza Chaouni, a local architect with the know-how and personal ties to Fez. In 2012, she rolled up her sleeves and kicked off a major facelift for the library. We're talking structural revamps, climate control upgrades, and making the place easier to navigate, all while keeping it looking authentically ancient. By 2016, after years of hard work, the doors swung open once more. Now scholars and curious cats alike could wander in and soak up the wisdom without the building falling apart around them. Thanks to Chaouni's efforts, the library was not only fixed up, but also set up for a bright future, continuing its long tradition as a cultural hotspot. Now, speaking of hidden gems, let's head over to Mali, where the ancient city of Timbuktu holds secrets of its own. And the biggest flex? The Timbuktu manuscripts. These old scrolls are handwritten treasures covering everything from art and astronomy to medicine, philosophy, and Islamic law. Think of it as Africa's very own ancient academic archive before Google, before Wikipedia. There was Timbuktu. What's even more amazing, these manuscripts didn't just sit in one big, dusty library. Nope. Families actually guarded them like family heirlooms, passing them down from one generation to the next, some even dating back to the late 13th century. And they weren't all in Arabic either. Some were written in African languages like Fula, Songhay, Tamashek, Bambara, and Soninka, but they were written using Arabic script. Now here's where things take a twist. By the 20th century, people outside of Mali finally started paying attention. In 1970, UNESCO was like, hey, this stuff is gold, and founded a preservation organization. But it didn't get any funding until 1977. Then, in 1998, Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates showed up with his PBS series Wonders of the African World and basically put Timbuktu on the map for millions. That publicity boost led to real money flowing in to save the manuscripts. Now let's sail from the sands of Timbuktu to the sea-bound shores of the Library of Rhodes. This gem tucked away among the ruins, wasn't just your run-of-the-mill stack of old books. When Alessandro della Seta and his crew started digging around in 1894, they hit the jackpot in Camiros. We're talking about a building so out of the ordinary with its rows of stone benches and niches in the walls, plus those drool-worthy mosaics and frescoes. Now, della Seta wasn't just digging for the sake of digging. When his team stumbled upon fragments of papyrus and parchment littered across the floor, bearing Greek inscriptions, you bet they knew they'd stumbled onto something big. And it wasn't just any old spot. It was the Library of Rhodes, a treasure trove that had scholars like Strabo and Pliny the Elder scribbling notes about it centuries ago. Can you imagine? Thousands of scrolls, all cozy in their niches, talking about everything from the stars to Sophocles. By the time Friedrich Blas got his hands on the manuscripts in 1902, he was like a kid in a candy store, uncovering works from big names like Pindar and Euripides. Now, let's pivot gently to another cradle of ancient wisdom. The Library of Thebes. Often called the House of Books, this storied spot was a powerhouse of ancient knowledge tucked away in the grand city of Thebes, or Waset, as the locals called it. It was strategically perched along the Nile, some 800 kilometers from the Mediterranean's salty embrace. Back in the good old days of Pharaoh Ramses II, during the 2nd millennium BC, this library wasn't just your average book nook. It boasted an inscription proudly proclaiming it as a house of books. You could say books were kind of a big deal even back then. Fast forward to the early 20th century, when Clarence S. Fisher and his team, courtesy of the Eckley B. Cox Jr. Fund, set out to dust off some history at Thebes between 1921 and 1923. Their playground? The necropolis at Dra Abu el Naga, nestled right between Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple and the infamous Valley of the Kings. This was where the VIPs of the Ramesside period, we're talking about the 19th and 20th dynasties here, around 1314 to 1085 BC, liked to hang out in the afterlife. Their mission? To clear out temple areas, make sense of tombs, and get all those wall and ceiling decorations down on paper. They scooped up photographs, scribbled down inscriptions, and sketched tomb scenes that would later find their way into the museum journal in 1924. But the real meaty publications? Those had to wait. Jump to 1966, when David O'Connor and crew picked up where Fisher left off. With a philologist wizard like Dr. Jaroslav Cerny and Lanny Bell by his side, O'Connor dove headfirst into verifying excavation records and getting all that ancient text ready for the world to see. They zeroed in on decorated tombs, piecing together funerary customs and the social pecking order of those days. Among their finds was the tomb of Anhotep, a viceroy of Kush, who, despite his high status, was only known from his tomb discovery. While they were at it, they uncovered some juicy tidbits about a guy named Bekenkhans, titles and family ties that had historians rewriting parts of his biography. They even stumbled upon texts from the opening of the mouth ceremony, which was like the ancient Egyptian version of a spa day for the soul in the afterlife. And speaking of uncovering things, let's zip over to Syria, where the ancient city of Mari, tucked away at Tel Hariri, was waiting under the sands. Back in August 1933, a Bedouin tribesman was looking for a stone to mark a grave up on a hill called Tel Hariri near Abu Kamal, Syria. What does he stumble upon? Not just any old rock, but a headless statue with some fancy cuneiform writing on it. Realizing he might have hit the jackpot, he didn't just walk away. Instead, he loops in Lieutenant Cabane, a French inspector kicking around the area. Lieutenant Cabane, sensing this could be something big, quickly gets on the horn to the Directorate of Antiquities in Beirut. And just like that, the news travels all the way to the Louvre Museum in Paris. Talk about your long-distance calls. The Louvre sends André Perrault, their ace conservator, to check things out. And wouldn't you know it, by January 1934, Perrault's team digs up a statue inscribed with King Ishki Mari, blowing the lid off the mystery. They've found the ancient city of Mari. This place wasn't just a pile of old rocks. It was a treasure trove of artifacts and tablets dating from the early 3rd to the late 1st millennium BCE, uncovering bits and pieces about early civilizations in the Near East. Imagine unearthing the Temple of Ishtar and finding oodles of statues, or stumbling upon the massive royal palace with thousands of tablets whispering secrets of ancient political, religious, and administrative chatter. And if that's not enough, they even discovered 2 copper lions that likely guarded the Temple of Dagon, plus a high terrace surrounded by more temples. Each find more spectacular than the last, offering a storyboard of human history etched in stone and metal. What do you think about these possible discoveries? Could their contents change everything we know about history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this incredible, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more astonishing historical finds, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.